Otherworldlyculture.com presents a panel discussion with cultural icon Clint Howard, moderated by Michael Exler, and recorded at Horror Realm 2026 in Pittsburgh.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. And listen, thank you guys for attending, and I appreciate it. I know we all appreciate the support from the community, from the horror community, or just people that enjoy movies. And they want to come out and say hi and have a couple of words of conversation, and, we enjoy it. My wife, Kat, and I have been going to a number of these for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's really cool. So anyway, thanks for coming.
So you were born into an actor's family. Was that something that you really wanted to do right off the bat? Or were you kind of pushed into it maybe, or nudged?
I don't know. It'd be kind of cruel to push a toddler. Here, kid, get out here. No, first of all, I don't remember. I probably acted for 3 or 4 years without any tangible memory of me as an actor. I mean, listen, I grew up around it by osmosis. I sort of always understood the process and always took to it. Now, my mom and dad always said that I was very relaxed. See, now, my brother, who was more of a trailblazer because he was the first, my brother is 5 years older than me. And so, I got to watch him, and I got to see how he did, how he behaved, and how, the sort of the details of what you do as an actor. Because it is a specialty situation. There is a lot of standing around. There's a lot of idle time. There's a lot of time where you could get into mischief, because you're just not doing anything. And then all of a sudden, it's when they say, come to the set, it's time to work, they expect you to be focused and concentrated. And so I give it all up to my dad, Rance Howard, because he was the one that gave both Ron and I this incredible sort of attitude of how to behave on a set. And I use, to this day, I've been in this business over 60 years, 64 years professionally. And I still use the lessons that Dad was inculcating in both of us to this day. One thing as an adult, you've got to be as good at 6:30 at night as you are at 8 o'clock in the morning. Because I will cavalierly say anybody can act at 8 o'clock in the morning. But try acting after you've been sitting around all day, drinking shitty coffee, and eating marginal food. And then all of a sudden it's 6:30 and the sun's going down and the assistant director's really nervous because they still have a lot of shots to do. And it's time to go. Gotta go. Let's go. Let's go. And you still have to remain poised and confident and deliver what they want, which is a performance, with their material. So.
Do you remember the first role? Like, what was your first role that you remember?
No, the first role I ever did was an episode of the Andy Griffith Show, and it was at a square dance, and that was in 1961. And it was a square dance, and the gag was the men and the women, and Barney was right in the middle of it. They were having kind of a difficult time connecting, and there was a certain amount of conflict between the men and the women, and there weren't a lot of people square dancing. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the episode, everything was good. All was good in Mayberry. And then they panned over and they saw me, and I was so small, and I was standing in a door jamb, and I was standing there leaning against the door jamb. And as small as I was, you could see the lock catch of a door jamb. You could see, I was leaning up against it. That's how small I was. My first real tangible memories as an actor was I did I was in a TV series called The Baileys of Balboa, and that was with Paul Ford and Sterling Holloway. And the unique thing about Sterling Holloway is he played the voice of Winnie the Pooh. Now, I worked with him as an actor. It was a funny little sitcom that didn't work. They shot it on black and white. At the time when the business was transitioning to color television, this show, The Baileys of Balboa, was shot in black and white. And they put it on, it was a sitcom, and they put it on at 10 o'clock at night. And so I think they did 13 episodes, and it went out of business. But I remember working with Sterling Holloway, and I remember a little bit of working with Paul Ford, because there were some memorable things. It's, when you're young, you remember the physical things. You don't necessarily remember doing the dialogue, but you remember, I remember taking a car ride down to Balboa to work on the show. And then I remember writing in one of these scenes of this series, Little Stanley, that was my character's name, I rode on a runaway vacuum cleaner. And they rigged it up to where it was like a little scooter, And I remember jumping on it and holding onto the handle and the vacuum cleaner moving a few feet while they could shoot a shot at me. So, and then later on, when I was about 6 years old, I did an episode of The Bonanza called All Ye His Saints. And it was a wonderful episode. It was written by a guy named William Blinn, who later went on to write a show called Brian's Song. But Bill Blinn was a hotshot young writer, and Bonanza hired him to do this episode, and it was a Christmas episode, and it was a boy whose father had been accidentally shot and was in a coma and looked like he was going to die. There was an old Indian that worked on the ranch, and the old Indian said to me, "Only God can save your father." And I said, "Elijah, where is God?" And he goes, "Oh, God lives up in the mountains, far, far up in the mountains." And the next thing you know, I jump on a mule, and I'm riding this mule up in the mountains to talk to God. Now, meanwhile, Hoss and Little Joe, they find out that I've run away, and they go chasing after me. I end up running into this guy. He's a hermit. He's a fugitive on the lam. He looks like God. This guy with long beard, and Leif Erikson was the actor that played him. Leif Erikson played this character that was running from the law, and he was hiding out up in the mountains. I think he's God. Anyway, he takes me captive, and finally God dies. And I look at the Indian, the same Indian that says God lives up in the mountains. He comes on the little posse to hunt me down, and he throws a knife in God's back. Leif Erikson. And Leif Erikson falls down dead, and I have this moment where I'm, "God, don't die, don't die." And then once he expires, I look up at this Indian and I simply say, "You killed God." Anyway, it's a pretty deep stuff. And I remember doing that episode. And here's a little detail, and I'll carry on. I can be long-winded. One of my biggest memories of working on that show was they filmed it up in Lake Tahoe. Not all of the episode. They filmed about probably 3 days down at Warner Brothers, and then they filmed about 3 days up in Lake Tahoe, shooting the beautiful scenery and stuff. Because Bonanza was then shot in color. And it was exciting to get on an airplane and fly. And so we flew into the Reno airport. And I'll never forget this. I get off the plane with my dad holding my hand. He stops in front of a slot machine, and he drops a few nickels into the slot machine and doesn't win anything. And he mutters, and he says something to the effect of, full memory of that, Dad. So, and then Star Trek, I remember working on Star Trek, and I remember working on Gentle Ben, of course, which started when I was 7, 8 years old. And at that point, I don't think it's abnormal. My memories start to really click in at about that age. And here's one thing, some of you guys can probably relate to this. I was always encouraged to tell stories. to tell these stories of what what I did in my life and working on Star Trek and now I have to be careful. Do I remember the memory, or do I remember telling stories about the memory? Because I must have talked in my life, I must have talked for 10 or 15 hours directly about being on Star Trek. I mean, the moment-to-moment details of being on Star Trek. Well, now, am I remembering actually being there, or am I remembering telling the stories? Anyway, there it is.
So you've done TV, film, voice acting. Is there a medium that you enjoy the most?
Oh, I think film. Now it's not shot on film anymore, is it?
No.
But yeah, when it's a one-off concept, when you're not having to repeat the character or not having to live up to the expectations of an audience that has already seen the characters and seen the show, working on a movie is a blast. And I'm working on a comedy. Because if the material is funny, it's just better. Like Waterboy. It was just a blast to work on that show with those guys. And an odd thing about Waterboy, I only worked on Waterboy for 3 days. It looks like I'm throughout the movie. Shot it all in 3 days. There was 2 days in Orlando and 1 day in Los Angeles. But still, it was a blast. And I have nothing but high regards for Adam, and Alan Covert, my acting partner, and all those people. Adam Sandler surrounds himself with really good, solid people. And a core group of people that Adam has worked with were people that he went to high school with and college with. So, Adam took people he was comfortable with, and he brought them with him as he ascended the world of storytelling and movie making and entertaining. So I appreciate I was all along for that ride.
When you're looking to take a role, what goes into it for you? Do you look at the overall film? Do you look at just the role itself? How do you accept a role?
Well, I look at the fact that they're going to ask for my social security number and they're going to give me a paycheck.
That's very fair.
It's a business.
Yes.
Now, no, that's simplistic. I do look at the material. I've rarely turned down jobs. There's been a few. There was, and I'll tell you, I'll give you okay, there was one job I specifically remember turning down, and that was House of a Thousand Corpses. I met Rob Zombie, and I liked him, and he was seemed like a really nice dude. I met him with Johnny Ramone at a convention. Him and Johnny Ramone were walking around a convention. They were actually looking for movie posters. And I had worked with Johnny on Rock and Roll High School. So they came up to the table, and I shot the shit with them for a little while. And then, anyway, later on, Rob, offered me this job in House of a Thousand Corpses. And I read the script, and I said, I appreciate it. Thank you. But I just can't do this. The scene that I had included a woman who had been pregnant, and her baby had been removed from her in the bathtub of a house. And at that point in my life, I just couldn't wrap my head around doing that scene. I wasn't the one doing it. I just would have been there. I don't know. Listen, let me jump ahead and tell you another one that I didn't do. And this is my vanity, and I was a butthole for doing this. But it was the original movie, The Flintstones. A guy that I knew, Brian Levant, who had been one of the people that had worked on Happy Days. He directed the first Flintstones. And I got a call, and the movie was interested in hiring me for a week or two to be Fred and Barney's bowling buddies. I guess there was a couple of scenes in the movie where, Fred and Barney have some pals, and they're hanging out at the bowling alley. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what I'm going to have to wear? I'm going to have to wear one of those fur-lined, fur-skinned outfits that we all loved in the cartoons. But it's a cartoon, and I don't feel like spending any of my life in one of those outfits. So I gladly passed, and I'm so embarrassed. Because first of all, wouldn't that be a pretty cool picture to sell at autograph shows? And the vanity, first of all, what am I protecting? I mean, it wasn't like nothing was going to be hanging out or anything. It was just my thinking. My thinking at the time was wrong. So I didn't. And I'll tell you one other one. As an adult, I took this job. But when I was about 21 years old, I went and auditioned for this movie called Evilspeak. It was a horror movie about a kid that gets possessed by a devil or a demon, maybe the devil himself, because he's been messing around on a computer. The demon enters into him, possesses him, and he goes about killing a bunch of people. He cuts people's heads off. He conjures up these pigs to go after this woman and go on this rampage. I mean, it's heinous stuff. When you read it on the page, you go, my God, Stanley conjures up all this stuff. Yeah, sure, he was picked on. But, getting picked on a little bit doesn't necessarily mean it gives you the right to take a sword and start whacking people's heads off. But anyway, so I read the script, and they were going to offer me this role. Lead role. And I went and talked to my dad. I said, Dad, what? And he goes, let me read the script. So he read the script. And he goes, you should take this job. Because, listen, let me tell you something. If you don't take the job, somebody else will. This movie's going to get made. And it's just a movie. It's just an imaginative story, But again, I will never forget my dad saying, if you don't take the job, somebody else will. And I was about 21 or 22 years old. And from that point forward, I really keep that in mind. And also, it's just a movie. If it's really well done, it can be effective, and it can scare the bejesus out of people, but it's still just a movie. I mean, like Terrifier. I mean, as gory as gut-wrenching. The one kid gets cut right in half, starting there, and it gets really ugly. It's just special effects. We don't make snuff films very often.
So I read a story that you and Don Stark on set for Evilspeak didn't really talk to each other. Was that true? How did that come about?
Well, it came about because they didn't talk to me. He was very cold to me. Oh. I'm generally a pretty happy-go-lucky guy on a set, although I do consider myself to a degree a method actor. I do try to drop into the zone, but I don't have to carry that zone with me 24/7. I don't have to go to lunch and be Stanley Coopersmith, who just saw his dog get butchered. When they yell cut, and Fred is a heaping pile of fake fur and leather, I can put the fake fur and leather down and I can go have lunch. Now I know some actors get into a zone and they keep the zone, like Don Stark kept the zone, and he didn't want to have anything to do with me. He didn't want to like me. He felt like his best work would be is if he and the other kids were the same way. Don just sticks out because he played Bubba. Right. But, everybody would be best served if we just didn't pal around. And so we didn't. After the show, he came up and said hi, and I, explained himself, and I completely got it. I go, yeah, that's fun. I didn't need to be your friend for the 3 weeks. We're acting buddies. We're acting buddies, acting partners. We're not friends. I like Don. Later on in life, I've run into him a few times, and he's a genuine. I wish his process would have been a little different because it would have been fun to hang out with him on the movie. The only person that I hung out with in Evilspeak was Haywood Nelson, the kid that was in What's Happening. The kid, hey. Well, he was my only friend in the movie. So, I spent a lot of time talking with the director, Eric Weston, and the cinematographer, Irv Goodenough. But as far as kids around, nobody my age except for Haywood. And, so we hung out some.
I watched an interview where you said you drove home in a bloody outfit. And you go ahead and tell that story.
Well, this was Ice Cream Man. And this is 1994 probably. And I had a house in Burbank, and we were working out at the kind of the other end of the San Fernando Valley, and it was a month-long movie, shooting fast, but not ridiculous. I mean, I just worked on a movie that they shot it in 10 days. A 10-day movie, and they got it done. And it's probably going to be pretty good. But, anyway, this was, Ice Cream Man took about a month. And after you work for a few days, the first day you always take your wardrobe off and you get into your regular clothes and you drive home. After a few days, when you're really tired and you worked for 14 or 15 hours on a set and they say it's a wrap, you go home. I just told the wardrobe person, I said, listen, I'll bring these clothes back. I'm just too tired. I'm going to drive home and I'm going to rinse myself off in the shower because I was fully bloody. I was absolutely just head to toe, both on my skin and on my clothes. I was bloody. So I drive home, and it was a night shoot, and it was probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Not a night shoot, but I didn't get home till it was just about dark. And I'm driving, I pull off the off-ramp, and I come to a stop, and I look over, and there's a woman with like a soccer mom with one of those vans, a soccer van, with like 5 or 6 kids piled in the back, and she's there up front driving, and she does a double take and looks at me. And I'll never forget this. She springs out of the driver's seat and lunges for that cargo door that's in the middle. She lunges and locks it, all the while looking at me like she's not going to let her kids get infected by me. And she didn't realize I was just a guy that had just made a little overtime that day, that's all.
In Ice Cream Man, your voice was very gravelly. And look, did you have to do something special to be able to do that?
Yeah, I yelled and screamed all the way to work. Every morning, at minimum, it would be a 15 or 20 minute drive to work. Sometimes a little further, but that's about what it was. I wouldn't really worry too much about it until I got into the car, and then I would start screaming. I mean, I'm not going to do it now. That just full blast. Wow. So by the time I got to the set, I sounded like that. Now, my ear, nose, and throat guy probably was not too happy. But it was a process. It was a way to, physically lock in. That character, Gregory, was an interesting character to play because, on the page, he's just complete friggin' psychopath. But I tried to... Okay, so he's nuts. Here's his thought process. He's friggin' nuts. Well, but he still needs to be empathetic. And I tried to land in a zone where, yeah, he was nuts, but there's a harmlessness about him and, a childlike presence about him that would be entertaining. And once I locked into it, then I was able to find it. And then throughout the course of the filming, play with it a little bit and lock in. That, being consistent is important. Guys, I'm making another Ice Cream Man. We're actually going to make a film. My wife, Kat, in the back. Kat?
Yes.
She's sporting an Ice Cream Man hat, another Ice Cream Man hat.
She's working on another opportunity.
Yeah. She's drilling down on. That's the new expression in show business. When you're working on a problem or an issue, you got to drill down. So I heard that from one of the attorneys. Let's drill down. But anyway, me and Kat and Norman Apstein are producing a movie called Another Ice Cream Man.
And for those that don't know who Norman Apstein is, he was actually the director of the first Ice Cream Man, and we owe Ice Cream Man to him because he found the script, got it, souped it up, and made the movie.
Yep. And so anyway, it's not a sequel. It's not. We're not doing like the continuing saga of Gregory, not Gregory. Gregory Tudor. we're not doing that. What we did, Kat and I and Norman sat around and we spitballed stuff and ideas. And actually, Norman and I worked on a couple ideas that didn't go anywhere. We just thought, it's just to creatively kind of work on an idea. Well, maybe my character could be some sort of voice in his ear that literally is sitting. There's a new ice cream man, and there's he's got a voice in his ear that's egging him on. And we tried to develop that, and it didn't work. But we've landed on this great story. And my character's name is going to be Craigie Brickle. And he's a 60-some-odd-year-old ice cream man who had a bad past life. Everything was rosy for a while, and then his twin brother apparently died in a fire at their ice cream party. And so he's kind of haunted by that. And he's been driving around for 30 or 40 years. He's been driving this ice cream truck, selling ice cream to kids. And the story kind of happens, it lands at a particular time when we're going to find out what it takes for a man to start putting body parts in ice cream. Because there was a movie called Falling Down, which was years ago, Michael Douglas. Guy was, he might have been a little weird, but he wasn't a killer. But by the end of the movie, enough shit had happened to the guy where you understood why he, spear somebody in the heart or whatever the game, I thought it was a great movie, too. But anyway, we used that as somewhat of a template. We got a lot of great surprises. We certainly are burying a few Easter eggs that are going to be a celebration of the original Ice Cream Man, but nothing plot related. We're going to have. I don't want to give you any names. I wish I could. It's just, Kat might want to come up and.
She's gonna say it in a second. Hold on.
Well, we have negotiations going on right now with Danny Trejo, who plays the Ice Cream Man's nemesis for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And our niece, Paige, is going to be in it.
Yeah, Paige Howard.
Yes, Paige Howard. She's going to make a good debut to the world community.
And also, I was in a guy's very first movie. Back in 1977, there was a guy that directed a Roger Corman movie called Grand Theft Auto. And I was in it. And I got paid scale. And I told him, I said, listen, I'll be in your movie if you be in my next, when I first directing job. If you, I'll find a spot for you in my first directorial effort, and will you be in it? And he agreed. So listen, there's a nice spot for Ron in the picture. It's not, you'll see. I want to keep the surprise. Got to keep the lid on the surprises. But anyway, we're going to gear up and shoot in the sort of late spring. We have, nowadays movie business has really changed. We're only going to be able to go about 23 days, 22 or 23 days. We're going to shoot some of it. I think we're going to shoot some of it in Illinois to get some tax incentives. And we're going to. Oh no, you got to play every angle.
Well, then also the co-directors for the movie. Yes,
we have a co-director. I'm going to be number one on the call sheet, and I am 66. I'll be 67 years old, and I certainly have the energy to do it. But to bring on somebody else to kind of be behind the camera when I'm in front of the camera, and also just take a little bit of the pressure off me. If the old man needs to go and take a nap, I've got this great plan. It may not work. I've got this great plan of designing a shot before lunch and then handing it over to Carmelo and say, Carmelo, shoot this shot. Shoot the shot before lunch and shoot the shot after lunch. Because that's probably 45 minutes between the shot before lunch and the shot after lunch. That's about a 45-minute time span. And then lunch itself is 30 or 40 minutes. So that would give me a nice hour and a half to go and crash out in the trailer so I can kick ass for the rest of the day. I've been in the business a few years. I've got some of this shit figured out. So anyway, look forward to it. Look, you'll be hearing more about it really soon. I'm not in that one that Eli Roth directed. Have nothing to do with that one. This is going to be called Another Ice Cream Man, and it's starring me. There it is.
So since we're in Pittsburgh, you were in several films with Pittsburgh's own Michael Keaton, Gung Ho, Night Shift. What was he like to work with?
Oh, Michael is a friggin' dream. First of all, he's really creative. And first of all, yeah, I did Gung Ho with Michael Keaton. He made a short film that appeared on the David Letterman Film Festival called But I'm Happy, where he directed it. He was in it and he directed it, and I have one of the juicy roles in this short film. And he was so inventive, and he's so easygoing. It was really a dream not a dream. It was just good. The one thing about Keaton is he's very inventive, but he doesn't invent out of a cookie cutter. He's not formulaic. He doesn't invent because he thinks the masses are going to like it. He invents because he likes it, you know? And shoot, his Batman holds up. If you go back and watch the way he played Batman, it was so friggin' good, and he wasn't chewing on the scenery, and he didn't friggin' look like he was sticking his chest out, you know, doing all the waving. You know, just, you know, he wasn't macho cool. He was just the way Bruce Wayne and Batman should be. So all that, you know, I tip my hat to him. And even though we're not like friends where we hang out or anything a lot, I've run into him a few times. But I just, as colleagues, I just feel a connection to Michael. And I just think he's, you know, a solid dude. And he is. We shot Gung Ho in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So you were also in Cocoon, and I was originally going to ask you, what's it like working with an all-star cast like that? But you're used to being around folks like that. But that cast was pretty amazing. What were your feelings on working with some of those guys?
Oh, you know, like you said, listen, don't take me wrong, but the fact that these people had been in some movies before didn't really faze me. I mean, I knew that the cast of the old people was special. I knew that. There was the guy that played the Cracker Jack Man. I thought he was cool, you know. There was Jessica Tandy and Hume Cronin. See, I wasn't not a New York theater guy, but I knew that they had this incredible career on the Broadway stage. And I looked at them and I thought, these people have a great work ethic. That was one thing about that movie. There was no prima donna, no diva, no bullshit. You know, Ron was a very young director, and they all listened to Ron. They must have been inspired by him at some point, because I felt like that they were all giving their all the time. And now one thing, this is going to be a little bit of a twist. I didn't know who Gwen Verdon was. I was told she was a dancer, a Broadway dancer. I was told that she had done some Broadway theater. And I thought, okay, you know, she seemed nice. Now, one of my favorite movies is All That Jazz, which Bob Fosse made. And I just thought it was a special movie. And then just in the last 6 months, I found out that Gwen Verdon was married to Bob Fosse. And now I'm kind of kicking myself that I wasn't a little more social, and if I would have known that I could have picked Gwen Verdon's brain a little bit about Bob Fosse. But anyway, you know, it's just that's the way my mind works.
So I'd like to move on to one of my favorite films that you were in, The Wraith.
Okay.
How did you get involved in the film? Was it a typical audition?
Well, I did audition for The Wraith. Mike Marvin, the director. But I'll tell you, this is an interesting little bounce back to a couple minutes ago. Mike Marvin was watching TV the night before, and he was watching Letterman. And he saw me on the David Letterman Film Festival, the Michael Keaton short, But I'm Happy. And that next morning, after he saw that short film and saw my work in that short film, he called the casting director and said, you got to get Clint Howard in here to audition. And they hadn't found a guy to play Rughead, but it was that Mike, they hadn't thought of me before, But because Mike Marvin saw me on the Letterman Film Festival, they called me in and they booked me for Rughead. And it was a blast. It was a great experience. I became friends with Charlie Sheen, and I've known Charlie Sheen. In fact, we were just texting just a couple of days ago. He was here at Steel City Con just last year, and he's doing well. And he actually is. He's doing very, very well. And I love Charlie. Charlie's a really good dude, and that was a great experience with Dave Sherrill, Jamie Bozian, Nick Cassavetes. You know, I got to do a scene with Randy Quaid. It was all really kind of fun stuff, fun, memorable stuff. But here's another thing about life. One of the great times of being on a set. I was also in Tucson. It was a day off, but I was in Tucson the day the Challenger blew up. And I remember this was pre-cell phones, internet, and I was watching on television, and the Challenger blew up, and I called my brother. And I said, can you believe what happened? You know, unbelievable. So the memory of, I know where I was when the Challenger blew up. I was in Tucson working on the Wraith.
Going back to Charlie, I read that he only shot like a couple days because of Platoon. Was that how that went down?
You got the story a little twisted. He was around. He worked a handful of days. He didn't do much time in the suit. Listen, I was not there, but I don't believe the picture of the guy in the Wraith suit on the cover of the DVD is Charlie. You know, so anyway, but no, he was around. No, he had gotten hired to be in Platoon, and then he was booked to do the Wraith. So he was going to do the Wraith and then do Platoon. And this is something that Charlie writes about in his book. And we had a producer who was kind of a butthole. There were many producers on the movie, so won't spoil it. But anyway, Charlie came to the set one day having had a couple too many adult beverages. Not that he was drunk, he was sick. And I'm a little bit to blame for that because I was participating that night with Charlie. And I was off that day. Charlie thought he was off that day. It was Sunday night, and Charlie thought, I'm not working Monday. Anyway, he comes to find out they changed the schedule. And he got a call Monday morning and said, you got to come to work. We're working today. Charlie, he's wobbly. He goes to work and he throws up in the trash can. This makes the producer really mad. The producer called Oliver Stone and told Oliver that he should reconsider hiring Charlie for Platoon because he was trouble. And he just got sick. He worked that day. It's not like he got sick and didn't work, So anyway, I know Charlie's had, he's danced with the devil like a lot of us have, like I have, and it's nothing to be proud of at all. But again, I have nothing but great things to say about Charlie. But that story about him only working a couple of days, it's not quite accurate. He worked on the movie, he finished, and then he flew to the Philippines to work on Platoon.
Shows you another thing that if it's on the internet, it's not always true.
Yeah.
So another guy you worked with closely on the film is Nick Cassavetes that you talked about. What was he like in real life? He just seems larger than life.
Well, he is. First of all, he's 6'6". He loves life, and he's a good dude at the core. He's gregarious in some respects. His mom was really special. Gina Rollins was I worked on a movie with Gina, and she was just very dynamic and really special. And I never met Nick's dad, John. But, his legacy of independent films and making interesting choices as an entertainer and a filmmaker is unparalleled. And Nick has gone ahead and had a wonderful career. He acted for a long time, and then he decided to start directing. He directed a movie called The Notebook, which made a few nickels. And he's gone ahead and made movies. He just finished a movie, not finished. He had a movie come out about a year ago called God is a Bullet, I believe. And I talked to him recently. He wants to, every time we talk, he goes, I got to get you in one of my movies. And he's only hired me in one movie. But that's okay. I consider him a friend. And he's a good dude. And I just, that's one thing about it's one thing about working on the Wraith. It's really only happened on 2 movies where I worked on the movie, and then at the end of the movie, we all hug and we go, God, what a great experience, exchange phone numbers, and we got to be friends. See, I lived most of my show business life without the internet and cell phones. We weren't, on the Wraith, no, we didn't have cell phones that we were going, here's my number, But we all exchanged numbers on the Wraith, and we all stayed in contact. And another movie that we did that on, a big core group of us did it on, was Apollo 13. The guys, the mission control guys, for years and years and years, we would have monthly lunches where we would go and hang out, and then go play golf, and the guys that played golf would play golf together, and it's just the camaraderie, which is weird. Camaraderie doesn't happen much in show business. On every movie, you always hug and shake the person's hand, and you go, God, it was great working with you. Let's stay in touch. And you never do. On to other adventures.
One last question about the Wraith. Talk a little bit about the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor in real life. What was that thing like?
Well, the real one was a prototype car. They did have a one-of-a-kind prototype that for a couple of days, they brought it out to Tucson, and with 2 or 3 engineers, and they rolled it off the trailer, and they let us all participate with it. But they were really weird about it. Like, they wouldn't let us touch it. It's a fucking car. It's our prop. We're using it in a movie here, But no, don't touch it. Don't get your fingerprints on it. Car. But for a lot of the Wraith, they built a kit car. They had a Volkswagen engine, or some sort of little car that they dropped the shell of the Interceptor onto this Volkswagen, and then they could beat that to hell. The cool thing about the Wraith is all that road racing is all real. There's a little CG, of course, when the Wraith is actually beaming down to Earth and the stars are exploding and all that shit. Yeah, that's not real. No, man, that's all real. But the car racing was old school. All the action stuff, all those cars racing when Packard's gang, when they were minty and those guys were trying to cut the Wraith like the Wraith was really going to lose. That was just real guys, stunt drivers in their stunt vehicles with a camera truck following them shooting film. And I'll tell you one sad thing about that movie is there was a death on the Wraith. The camera truck hit some gravel. The camera truck's a big, looks like a tow truck that's fitted out so people can sit on the back and film, and it's heavier. And it was following the racing, and it hit some gravel and slid off an embankment, and one of the workers got killed. One of the cameramen got killed. And the assistant director got badly injured, like he got conked on the head and was never the same. So yeah, that was not without its sadness. But the friggin', Mike Marvin, that if you go back and look at that film, there's some good action.
So one last question from me before we take some from the audience. You said you turned down Rob for House of a Thousand Corpses, but you ended up working on several films with him. What kind of a director is he?
Oh, he's great. Rob's very mild-mannered. He's all about his business. I mean, he looks like Rob Zombie. He doesn't come to work with his hair in a ponytail. He comes to work looking like Rob Zombie, but yet he runs a great set. He's very health conscious. Him and Sherry are very health conscious, and that's one beef I have. And I mean, I'm a little more so now than I was the last time I worked for him. But the craft service table, bullshit. you couldn't find a donut, you know? You couldn't find real milk to put in your coffee. I'm sorry, almond milk in coffee doesn't quite cut it, you know? I need whole milk. So anyway, that's, you know, very health conscious, and I, you know, I like Rob, and I hope to work for him some more.
Yeah, I definitely hope he puts out more films for sure. So who has a question for Mr. Right there?
Oh, do I need the microphone?
No,
Just shout out.
just shout out.
Hello again, Clint.
I can't hear you. No, I'm teasing.
Hello again. Yeah, I enjoyed Six from the early 90s. That was an underrated King China symphony, I gotta say. Do you have any interesting or funny behind the scenes stories about filming that movie by any chance?
Well, the Ticks, that character was not in the original movie. I auditioned for that movie and didn't get a part. And then later on, Tony Randall, the director, contacted my agent and said, there's something we'd like to have Clint do. And they had edited the movie together and realized that there was something that was missing, like the genesis of why these ticks are the size of Volkswagens. And they invented this character who lived off in the woods, and he was the one that was putting the steroids, and the ticks were eating the steroids. He was growing weed. Did not exist in the original script, and I worked on it. It was one day. I worked on that movie one day, and you know, most of the time it was about having the makeup on. Tick blew out of my face, and still a fan favorite, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right in the back.
Hey, Clint, it's great seeing you up here, and I love all the stuff you've done. But I have a question for you. What's it like working for your brother? Do you guys ever butt heads or have difference of opinions of any of your scenes?
Well, I mean, we don't butt heads. I mean, I'm a pro. I would never butt the head of a director.
No.
But there were a couple of times early on where little brother was probably overstepping his bounds of wanting to make suggestions and ideas. And then once or twice Ron said, you know, that's really not your decision. And I love Ron, and I don't think it didn't take more than once or twice for that to happen before I realized, you know, he's the chief, I'm just an Indian, you know, and he's a great chief. He really is a great leader on a set. He's probably the best director I've ever worked for. I worked for some good directors, and everybody has their own little different kind of way they operate, but Ron's really good. But no, now it's just fun. I haven't worked for him for a long time. He's made the last 3 or 4 movies he's made over in Europe. And I was in Solo. Solo was I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I worked on Solo, and that was fun.
Thank you.
Sure.
Who else has a question?
One of my favorite movies of all time is Apollo 13. And you mentioned that in the Challenger and everything. So, you know, that experience of the Challenger, was that brought onto the set? And I mean, those control guys are such high stress, but yet under control. How did you guys do that? Like to have that level of intensity, but yet control?
Well, listen, the Challenger accident was 8 years before. I don't believe it was not much of an issue. The Apollo 13, we got a tremendous amount of help from technical advisors, guys from NASA, guys that worked the program. Jerry Griffin, Jerry Bostic, the guy that I played in the movie, Cy Lieber guy. He didn't work on the set, but I had contact with him. These guys saw the kind of movie that Ron and Tom were trying to make. And they appreciated the tone. It was going to be honest. All Ron was trying to do was explain how these men, and it's sad to say at that time, NASA, there were no women that worked at NASA, but how these men figured out the procedure to bring astronauts home that were that stranded. And you got to remember, I'm a big space guy. I've read the books, and what they did, what the men at Mission Control did, and I'm not mean Mission Control, all over the country, Alabama, they had a big plant in New Jersey, they had simulators all over in California, Rockwell, Rocketdyne. They immediately, first of all, it was a quadruple failure. the failure of the system. They hadn't done any simulations. They'd done simulations for a lot of things. They hadn't come close to doing a simulation that involved this. So then they had to figure it out, and the clock's ticking. And they got dudes up in space that they don't want to have die. And once they realized, okay, they have oxygen for a little while, let's figure out how to get them home. And then literally hundreds and hundreds of people with very little use of a computer. They did have computers, but it was basically just manpower, figuring out problems, slide rules, and there were so many things that could have gone wrong. And yet, the guys in Houston and all around the country that, the Grumman, the people, the rocket that the lunar module was going to use to lift off from the moon. Yeah, that ended up being a propulsion system for them to go home with. Now, they had no idea that engine was ever going to get used in space. It was only designed to do one thing, and yet they figured out how to make it do something else to get these guys home. And the one thing I've heard this from Jim Lovell, and wow, you did heroic things up there in space. He goes, no, we didn't. We were up there in that capsule, sitting there, waiting to take orders. They didn't do anything. They waited for the people in Houston to send them what the procedure was going to be on how to get home. And then they followed the rules. So anyway.
Well, Clint, thank you for sharing all these stories and your time with us.
Sure.
Go see Clint at his table, get an autograph, get a picture, and put your hands together for Clint Howard.
Thank you. And let me say two things. In terms of another ice cream man, we have some new merchandise that we came in. We got a T-shirt, and I brought a T-shirt here to give to somebody who had the best ice cream man question. And there were no ice cream man questions, but I know there was a big following. This is I think we have a large shirt. We have a large shirt. Would somebody like to have another ice cream man shirt? Okay, that fella right there that doesn't want to put his hand up. Okay, we'll see you later. Thank you.
Otherworldlyculture.com. Subscribe, like, and comment on our posts all over social media and our site, otherworldlyculture.com.